I was telling somebody this week that my dad was the smartest man I've ever met. And that's not to take away anything from anybody else that I've met. But my dad never learned how to read and write. He used to tell us that he quit school in the first grade because he had to go scrap cane. But my dad could learn how to do anything. When I was little, I remember that my brothers used to sit at the table with him when he was in from on the boat, and they would read from the manuals of the Coast Guard. And he would learn everything that they were reading to him. And he went and take those tests with the Coast Guard. And when my dad retired as an inshore tugboat captain, he couldn't be replaced. No one else had all the licenses and permits that he had. And he couldn't read or write. But my dad once told me, he says, you know, he had this, I guess you could say this conventional wisdom or this simple wisdom. He told me, he said, when I was working on a car, and he said, just remember something. He said, watch how you take it apart, because when you put it back together, you just go in the opposite direction. And that taught me so much, because I think everything in life can be summed up with that. But my dad had a problem. He fought in World War II, and he came back, and everybody told me that he came back a completely different person than the one that left. My dad was an alcoholic. And all through my life, being the youngest of 5 boys, all through my life, I never really saw my dad not go an extensive amount of time without drinking. He had surgery. He wouldn't drink because he was on medicine. But as soon as he got off the medicine, he went back. And one time that he decided to try to stop, realized he had a problem, he went for 6 months without drinking. He stayed home. He was trying to get on Social Security and all kind of stuff like this, and everything just fell apart. So he went back to work. And when he went back to work, he went back to drinking. You see, that temptation never left. In that 6 months, he never felt as good in his life as he did in that 6 months that he went without drinking. My dad was a provider. He made sure that we had everything we needed. He didn't make us starve so that he could have his alcohol. He made sure that we had what we needed. Not necessarily what we wanted. Of course, I can say it a little different because I was the youngest of 5 boys. So I got a little bit more. But my dad was a provider. But he couldn't resist that temptation. He couldn't get away from that demon in his life, even though he knew that there was a better life without it. And you know, we can look at our lives and maybe not have that serious a problem, right? Not be alcoholics, but we have things that we get tempted to do that we know are not right. Sometimes we get into a conversation and realize that we've been gossiping. Sometimes you hit your finger and don't say words you can say in church. You know, we all fall to some type of temptation. And we know, as Catholic Christians, that Jesus Christ is our good shepherd, that he has a plan for us, that he wants to provide for us. Now, what's the difference between a good shepherd and a shepherd, right? A shepherd raises sheep, and he raises sheep for a purpose, right? They're going to cut the hair off of the wool, and he sells it and makes a profit. And especially in Jesus' day, they ate more lamb than anything else, so the sheep were raised for food. So when danger came about, he made sure he protected it because he had a vested interest. And Jesus tells us that the hired man would run away and just let the sheep get eaten by the wolves. But the difference in a good shepherd, as Jesus describes it, is that he has no benefit in shepherding his flock. You see, he doesn't want to be our good shepherd for his profit. He does it for ours. He wants us to learn his will and to learn how to live the life that he has for us. It's by surrendering to him. That's by avoiding those temptations, avoiding those things that get in our way and lead us away from the flock. Sometimes no matter how small it is. But you see, the Good Shepherd gave us a whole lot of avenues, right? See, the Good Shepherd, not only is he not to profit from us, but He gave us Himself so that we might eat, so that we might have that spiritual food in the Eucharist. His body and blood is going to be on this altar, and it's going to be offered to us. And like Father Carl said last week to the kids making their first communion, that spiritual food that helps us grow from the inside out, that helps us to become closer to Jesus Christ, our Good Shepherd. You see, it wasn't for His profit that Jesus came and died on the cross and rose again. It was for ours. And you see, He says in the Gospel that I know mine and mine know me. And when I was reading that, I was thinking, do we really know Him? Do we really know Him? How do we get to know who Jesus Christ really is and what purpose He has in our life? What He has for us to do? It's by speaking to Him. It's by having that conversation with Him. And I know y'all going to get tired of hearing me say this because I've been here a little over 2 years already, and I've said it many times. My favorite phrase from St. Francis de Sales, when he says, everyone needs a half an hour of prayer every day, unless you're busy. Then you need an hour. Because he's telling us that the busier the world gets around us, the less we hear the shepherd. The less we can know how much we need Jesus in our lives. And trust me, I have had those lessons this past week. Because when I was working on this homily, everything just went wrong. And you see, we have to focus on the shepherd. We have to listen to what He's saying, and the only way to listen to what He's saying is to have that conversation with Him. But our conversation can't be one way. We can't sit there and say everything that needs to be said and never stop and listen. So, no homework today, but a challenge. A challenge is that when you're saying your morning prayers, your evening prayers, whenever it is that you pray, and if you're not used to it, I want you to give 5 minutes of silence. You let Jesus know what's on your heart, and then stop and listen for Him. And when you can master 5 minutes, give Him 10. And so on and so on. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to hear what Jesus has to say to us. It's to block out everything else in the world. Because it's all distractions. It's the wolves that come to lead us away from scatter us from the flock. But the shepherd, the good shepherd, wants to defend us. The good shepherd wants only things that are good for us. The good shepherd wants us to surrender to Him and listen to Him. Are we ready to follow the Good Shepherd? Are we ready to give up those things in our lives that distract us from that relationship with Him? Those things that lead us away? My dad struggled with his demons. And his demons were great. And I say that most of us don't have those kind of demons. But what is it in our lives that distract us from our relationship with Jesus? What is it that we have in our life that tempts us and scatters us from the flock? But not only did He give us the Eucharist to give us Himself, He gave us confession, reconciliation, so that we can empty our hearts, empty our minds, and listen to the Good Shepherd. Are we ready to accept His challenge? And I hope you take mine also. But He's the one that challenges us. He's the one that wants to bring peace to us. Are we ready to listen?